Every newborn calf born on a dairy farm represents an opportunity, whether it's an opportunity to maintain or increase herd size, or to improve the herd genetically, or to improve economic returns to the farm by selling replacement animals, by increasing future milk production, or both.
The nutrition and feeding management of the calf can have a dramatic impact on its health, growth, and productivity. This video will focus on the more important aspects of feeding management in areas affecting calf physiology and animal productivity, management strategies that are indispensable for today's top-producing dairy herds and calf-raising operations.
To better understand the complexity involved in raising young calves, it is necessary to understand the unique physiology of a newborn calf, how it changes as the animal develops, and how their digestive system functions, both as a young calf and later as a mature ruminant. When the dairy calf is born, it contains the 4 stomach compartments typical of a ruminant animal. However, at birth, the calf functions primarily as a monogastric, or single-stomached animal. The first 3 compartments of the calf's stomach, reticulum, rumen, and omasum, are inactive and undeveloped. It is the abomasum in the newborn which functions similarly to a human stomach. As the calf grows and begins to consume a variety of feeds, its stomach compartments begin to grow and modify. The digestive tract of newborn calves mature greatly during the first few weeks of life. The actual size and proportion of the calf's stomach compartments change drastically as the rumen begins to function. The calf's diet has a significant effect on this development. The diet needs to match the calf's current stomach development. The nutritional sources of the diet must be easily digestible and highly nutritious in terms of energy, protein, vitamins, and minerals, because the calf is still considered a monogastric. At birth, the reticular rumen makes up 30% of the stomach compartments, although it is not functional. The omasum at birth makes up approximately 10%. The true stomach, or abomasum, is actually the only stomach compartment functioning at birth and makes up the remaining 60%. By 4 weeks of age, all of the organs are larger, but the relative size of the rumen and abomasum has reversed. The reticular rumen now makes up roughly 60% of the 4 stomachs, and the abomasum makes up about 30%. The omasum has remained roughly the same relative size. Keep in mind that the total size of the organs grow in proportion to the body size of the calf. By 12 weeks of age, the reticular rumen will make up more than 2/3 of the total stomach weight. The true stomach functions as it did at birth, and it has actually grown in size, but the reticular rumen is now roughly 3 times the size of the abomasum and functions as the major part of the stomach system. As the stomach compartments develop more fully, the calf can begin functioning as a mature ruminant. The objective of calf nutrition is to promote rumen development early on in life. A functional rumen acts as a fermentation vessel for microorganisms which digest complex carbohydrates and high-fiber feedstuffs. Let's take a closer look at the newborn and how it can assimilate nutrients during the first few days of life. The lining of the rumen wall in an adult cow has a very pronounced covering of papillae. These papillae are finger-like projections that line the rumen and increase the surface area greatly, and thus the area through which nutrients can be absorbed. Papillae development is not stimulated by the fibrous nature of the feed, but rather by the end products of microbial digestion. 3 of these end products are the major volatile fatty acids, acetic, propionic, and butyric acids. The fiber digesters, the microbes that break down forages, produce primarily acetic acid and some propionic acid. The starch digesters, the microbes that break down grain, produce primarily propionic acid and small amounts of butyric acid. Typically, when we think of VFAs, we think of acetic and propionic acid. But butyric acid, although produced in much smaller quantities and only with grain diets, is the only VFA that provides energy for growth of the rumen wall. The other VFAs are important for energy for the whole calf, but they have no effect on rumen development. Only butyric acid does, and butyric acid only comes from grain. This becomes more clear as we show rumen development of calves fed different diets. It takes at least 3 weeks for a rumen to become developed enough to function like a mature rumen, if the calf is fed the appropriate diet. At birth, the rumen is not functional, and it has little tissue development and does not have a population of microorganisms. The walls of the rumen in a newborn calf are thin and paper-like. They have no visible papillae and very little surface area for absorption. In the absence of a functional rumen, the calf depends on its digestive enzymes released primarily from the abomasum and small intestine for the assimilation of fats, energy, and protein. After the calf swallows colostrum, milk, or milk replacer, the ingested liquid bypasses the rumen through the esophageal groove and passes into the abomasal canal for rapid and efficient digestion in the true stomach. The esophageal groove is made up of muscular folds from the reticulum that come together with the stimuli of suckling. This fold works well with the calf's head in any position, but only with liquid feeds that are fed naturally or fed with a nipple, bottle, or bucket. Esophageal feeders may not allow the esophageal groove to close, thus forcing colostrum into the rumen.
When calves are fed colostrum properly, the esophageal groove closes, and this colostrum passes directly into the abomasum. In the abomasum, the stomach walls secrete rennin, which is an enzyme that acts on casein or milk protein. It causes the casein and the fat in the colostrum to form a curd. This curd is composed of fat and protein. It will be digested slowly for the next 12 to 18 hours. The enzymes in the abomasum and small intestine that break down protein and fat are produced in limited amounts in the first 48 hours of life. The curd formation allows the digestive tract to slowly, yet efficiently, digest and assimilate the nutrients fed. The second feeding of colostrum simply adds to the already formed curd in the stomach. This system of digestion allows the calf to slowly receive nutrients around the clock for the first 2 days of life. Whey is another fraction of colostrum. However, it does not form part of the curd. Whey is composed of water, minerals, lactose, and other proteins. One group of these other proteins is the immunoglobulins. These proteins pass out of the abomasum directly into the small intestine within a few minutes after feeding. They are quickly absorbed into the bloodstream of the calf. In this way, the limited digestive capacity of the newborn can absorb the immunoglobulins quickly to give the newborn calf needed passive immunity. The abomasum is the only truly functional part of the 4 stomach compartments in the newborn. However, in the adult cow, the rumen is the largest and most important part of the 4 stomach groups. After colostrum feeding, the types of feeds fed to the calf and age at which they are offered and consumed will have a dramatic impact on the growth and development of the rumen. For the purpose of this discussion, we will generically refer to the liquid feed fed to calves as milk, even though it could be whole milk, milk replacer, or waste milk. These will be discussed in more detail later.
There are 2 separate components to the development of the rumen. The first is the actual physical size of the organ. At birth, the rumen is small and underdeveloped. Regardless of diet, the rumen will grow as the calf gets larger, but the relative size of the rumen depends on diet. By 4 weeks of age, if fed only milk, the calf's rumen will be quite small in size in relation to the other compartments, especially when compared to the rumen size of calves the same age, fed grain or combinations of grain and forage. The physical size will continue to be small in relation to the abomasum if the calf receives only a diet of milk after 4 weeks of age. The longer a period of time that the calf is fed large amounts of liquid feeds, the more the relative size of the rumen will be restricted. The second aspect of rumen development is the elongation and development of the rumen papillae and thickening of the rumen walls. Feeding management can drastically affect their development. The rumen on the left is from a 4-week-old calf that was fed only milk. The one on the right is also from a 4-week-old calf, but it was offered grain at 3 days of age and consumed milk and grain in moderate amounts. The calf-fed grain in addition to milk has a great deal more papillae development and a much thicker, darker, and more vascularized rumen wall. Now compare a third calf that was fed milk and a high-quality hay from 3 days of age. Despite eating moderate amounts of hay, the papillae are not at all developed and the rumen wall is quite thin. This is because the end products of digestion of the hay includes more acetic acid and lacks butyric acid, so the rumen wall and papillae do not develop. Calves that have access to large amounts of forages will have a considerable increase in rumen size. However, this is due largely to a stretching of the tissues and not real growth of the rumen. Let's compare the rumen of calves fed milk and grain from birth until 4, 8, and 12 weeks of age. In each case, as the calves get older, the papillae are larger and the rumen walls are thicker. Yet compare these to the rumen development of calves fed milk and hay until 4, 8, or 12 weeks. The development of the papillae from these calves is very limited, and the rumen walls remain thin, despite them consuming appreciable amounts of hay. In fact, the rumen development of the 4-week-old calf on milk and grain is greater than the 12-week-old calf that was fed milk and hay. The rumen development of calves fed milk, grain, and hay will vary from calf to calf, depending on its preference for dry feedstuffs. The bottom line is that a small amount of grain, along with water, will create fermentation and butyric acid production in the rumen. This, in turn, allows a more functional rumen that can better digest grains and will be able to digest forages earlier in life. The process of rumen papillae development is self-generating and can allow the early grain-fed calf to have a tremendous amount of rumen development at an early age, by 3 to 4 weeks. This is why it is recommended to feed grain early, thus stimulating rumen development and allowing calves to be weaned at an earlier age. To achieve early intakes of dry feed, calves must be offered water free choice. By 1 month of age, calves may be drinking at least 1.5 to 2 gallons per day. By 2 months of age, they should be drinking 2 to 2.5 gallons per day. Hay, because it is less energy dense per unit of volume, is not recommended for calves until weaning time and when grain intake has reached adequate levels. As explained earlier, when rumen microbes digest forages, more acetic acid is produced. This will not allow maximum papillae development like grains do, because grains ferment to butyric and propionic acids. Forage is important, however, to the weaned calf in order to promote the growth of the rumen muscular layer and to promote a healthy rumen interior. Calves should be consuming 5 to 6 pounds of grain prior to receiving appreciable amounts of hay. This way, hay feeding will not slow down the calf's growth rate.
Although the primary goal is to get calves started on dry feed as early as possible, the liquid or milk portion of the calf's diet is equally important. There are 2 time periods in the young calf's life that the milk diet is critical to its survival and growth. The first is in the initial 24 hours after birth when it's introduced to first colostrum. And the second starts around day 3 when the calf moves on to its regular liquid feeds. And this period lasts until the calf is weaned. Colostrum is an essential part of a newborn calf's survival. The quality and quantity of colostrum a calf receives are major factors affecting morbidity and mortality rates. Colostrum is the first milk that calves receive immediately after birth. Colostrum contains high levels of protein, vitamins, fat, and large quantities of antibodies. The antibodies found in colostrum are composite and concentration of those found circulating in the dam's bloodstream. In colostrum, the levels range from 6% to 14% of the total amount. Yet, in their dam's bloodstream, they are found in very small amounts, in the range of 1/10,000th of a percent. Therefore, it takes a period of several weeks to concentrate the high levels that are found in first colostrum. Calves derive immunity to infectious diseases from these gamma-globulins, or antibodies. This is different from how some mammals and humans receive protection. For example, humans are born with relatively high antibody levels. Antibodies were passed directly into the bloodstream from the mother's blood. Calves are born with little such protection. Cloven-footed animals have a type of placenta through which antibodies cannot pass. For this reason, it is essential that the newborn calf receives colostrum within the first hour or two of life. It is during this time period when the calf consumes colostrum that it can absorb antibodies directly into the bloodstream from the gut without digesting them. This provides readily available protection for the calf against disease to which the dam is immune. This type of protection from the dam to the calf is referred to as passive immunity. The level of these antibodies is very closely related to the calf's overall resistance to infectious agents. Timing has a critical role in determining if the calf will acquire adequate passive immunity. As more time elapses after the calf is born, there is loss of absorptive sites and bacterial colonization begins in the intestine. The general recommendation is to feed first colostrum within the first hour or two of birth. The amount of colostrum to feed should be about 2 to 3 quarts within the first hour and 4 quarts total within 12 hours after calving. Adequate amounts of high-quality colostrum are necessary for the calf very soon after calving in order to maximize passive immunity. Delayed milking of cows after birth can affect the health of their calves unless clean, stored colostrum is used. Feeding pooled colostrum is not recommended unless the health status of the herd is known. For example, cows that have diseases such as Johne's and bovine leukosis may transmit disease to the calf through the colostrum. After a calf is 3 days old, there are several options available to the dairy producer in regards to the kind of liquid feeds to use. One of several different liquid feeds may be fed throughout the year. Whole milk, waste milk, or fresh or fermented colostrum are excellent feeds when available and if they fit into the calf raising system. Milk replacers are also good for calves. Research indicates that a variety of liquid feeds given at correct dilution rates can all achieve satisfactory results. A calf should be fed approximately 10% of its body weight at birth per day. So a calf weighing 100 pounds would receive 10 pounds of milk daily. Feeding much below this amount causes poor growth due to the lack of nutrient intake for the first few weeks of life.
Let's begin with milk replacer. Milk replacers are often more convenient than feeding milk or waste milk. This is because the calves are generally housed in different areas on the farm than the milking cows, and the transport of saleable milk and waste milk is difficult. Milk replacers can be manufactured with a variety of ingredients and levels of nutrients to match the management requirements of a large variety of farms. You can mix additives to whole or waste milk, but it may be simpler to mix milk replacer that already contains vitamins, antibiotics, coccidiostats, or ionophores. One major reason for the use of milk replacers is the savings in cost over the alternative of using whole milk. The milk replacer industry has a variety of products to meet the needs of these various customers. As with most purchased items, quality is related to price when comparing product lines. The general nutrient recommendation for milk replacer is to be from 18 to 24% crude protein, with 20 to 22% the most common. Crude fat levels can range from 10 to 22%, with 15 to 20% the most often fed and recommended. It is important that major minerals including calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium are balanced, as well as trace elements and vitamins A, D, and E. Milk replacers should be fed at rates equal to 9 to 14% of body weight at birth. For example, if a calf weighs 90 pounds, it should be fed roughly 9 pounds of milk replacer. That's 1 pound of powder and 4 quarts of water. And this is the amount that should be fed per day up to weaning. Faster rates of growth can be achieved with a higher feeding rate as long as calves start off slowly and are gradually built up in amounts fed per day. This will avoid scours from occurring.
To keep you warm, don't you, sweetie?
Feeding whole milk to calves is an acceptable practice. Supplementing whole milk with proper amounts of calf starter is an excellent calf feeding program. Problems may occur from overfeeding and suddenly changing the quality or quantity of whole milk. These may cause digestive upsets and scouring. This may often occur when waste milk is fed on occasion instead of whole milk. Overfeeding whole milk or overfeeding milk replacer to calves also leads to less consumption of dry feed and grain, thus prolonging rumen development and weaning time. Feeding whole milk is usually more expensive compared to other sources of liquid feeds. For that reason, it is not considered the best liquid feed for the pre-weaned calf. Feeding waste milk to dairy calves is an acceptable practice. However, it should be pasteurized before feeding. Feeding unpasteurized waste milk to calves can increase the risk of transmitting a variety of diseases from your adult animals to young calves. These diseases include Johne's disease, Salmonella, BVD, bovine leukosis, Mycoplasma species, and contagious mastitis. Pasteurizing transition or waste milk is recommended to reduce the risk of disease transmission problems. Economics and consistent quality control procedures must be evaluated before investing in a pasteurizer. To prevent antibiotic residue problems, milk from treated cows should only be fed to calves being kept as herd replacements or calves that are kept for a period of at least 8 to 12 weeks after the last feeding of such milk. Waste milk that is known to come from a cow infected with E. coli, Pasteurella, Johne's, or bovine leukosis should never be used. Regardless which liquid feed is used, it is best to feed calves 2 times per day at regular times. This can help avoid digestive upsets and nutritional scours. The amount of liquid feeds given to a calf has often been associated with the amount of growth obtained by calves prior to weaning. In actuality, this is an incorrect assumption. Under most situations, milk or milk replacer feeding provides energy and protein to support limited amount of body weight gain. Although the amount of gain supported by liquids depends on many factors, such as the body weight of the calf, environmental conditions, and health of the calf, liquid feed alone will generally support only a 0.6 to 0.8 pound per day gain. Optimal body weight gain of 1 to 1.8 pounds of gain per day will be obtained by consumption of both calf starter and liquid feeds. Because calves are fed for limited body weight gain from liquid feeds, the importance of the calf's environment becomes especially important. The amount of liquid feed that will support 0.7 pounds of body weight gain in thermoneutral conditions will not support the same gain when the temperature falls to the single digits or colder. Generally, when the temperature is below freezing, additional energy may need to be supplied. When feeding milk replacer, this can be achieved by using a higher fat milk replacer. For example, going from 10% fat to 20% fat. Another way to accomplish this would be to increase the amount of dry matter or powder added to feed each calf. In summary, there are several kinds of liquid feeds available after colostrum that are suitable for calves. They include fresh colostrum, whole milk, waste milk, and milk replacers. The amount of liquid feed to use is 10% of the calf's initial body weight. So a calf weighing 100 pounds would receive 10 pounds of liquid feed per day. A calf weighing 80 pounds would receive 8 pounds. It is important to note that when all calves are fed the same, regardless of size, some are getting underfed and others overfed. Adjustments in the liquid diet in respect to quantity and quality are influenced by the calf's body weight, environmental temperature, and health. The key to successfully raising calves is sanitation. Good practices in this area can greatly reduce calf morbidity and mortality. The pre-weaned calf requires both liquid feeds as well as dry feeds. Calves should be offered a dry grain mix within a few days after birth. Calves usually consume very little grain during the first week of life. By the second week, calves should be consuming noticeable amounts. Adequate intakes of dry feed early on is important because dry grain stimulates rumen development in the calf. Dry grain increases the number and variety of rumen bacteria and protozoa. These microorganisms grow rapidly on the grain in the rumen and produce the volatile fatty acids propionate and butyrate. These acids, which are products of fermentation, provide nutrients for the calf and stimulate rumen development. Calves should be consuming between 1.5 to 2 pounds of calf starter per day before being weaned. This ensures continued adequate energy intake post-weaning. The quality and palatability of a good calf starter are key to adequate intake levels early on in life. These young growing animals need sufficient amounts of protein and energy to grow at rapid rates in both body weight as well as structural growth. It is recommended that the dairy calf receive a starter containing 18 to 20% crude protein. In order to encourage intake of a calf starter, it must be palatable. A textured grain like this one contains some coarse textured corn, small grains and pellets fortified with protein, minerals, and vitamins. It also contains some molasses, both within the pellet and/or the entire mixture. This greatly improves palatability and reduces separation and waste. In addition, sweeteners and flavoring agents are added to the feed to enhance palatability and intake. Feed that is very fine tends to cake together if it gets wet and results in very low intakes, thereby retarding rumen development and decreasing growth rates. Conditions when a calf starter is not palatable to the calf is when it is dry, dusty, moldy, or it has an off flavor. High moisture grains are not recommended at this time for the calf also. High moisture grains can heat quickly and mold in the feed buckets or mangers. In order to use them, the grain buckets would need to be emptied and refilled once, maybe even 2 times each day, especially during the hot summer months. Forage is important to promote growth of the muscular layer of the rumen and to maintain the health of the epithelium. However, this can be accomplished by incorporating hay into the diet after weaning. A good recommendation is to wean calves hopefully at 4 to 5 weeks of age and when they are eating 1.5 to 2 pounds of calf starter per day. Hay can be offered from 6 to 7 weeks of age when grain intake is about 4 to 6 pounds per day. If calves are weaned late at 8 to 12 weeks of age, then limited amounts of hay could be fed to the calf starting at 6 weeks of age. That's provided that grain intake is not limited because of excessive hay consumption. There are several other reasons why hay should not be offered to the pre-weaned calf. Most calves do not eat significant amounts of hay if grain is offered. What usually happens is producers offer their best quality hay only to have it turned into bedding. Another reason not to feed hay to the pre-weaned calf is the energy requirement of pre-weaned calves. In young, small animals, space in the digestive tract, termed gut fill, becomes a limiting factor to obtaining enough nutrients on high forage diets. Calves have a high energy requirement relative to their ability to consume dry feed because of their limited body size and gut fill capacity. Therefore, if calves consume significant amounts of hay, their intake of starter will be limited. The nutrients in grain are more rapidly and more completely digested than those in forages. It is some of the structural carbohydrates in forage that reduce digestibility rates in young calves. If starter intake is reduced, then growth will be slowed down. Most hay, even excellent quality alfalfa, has too little energy per unit or volume of material for calves. Remember, to encourage adequate intake of dry feed, calves need fresh water offered daily. By 1 week of age, the dairy calves should begin to drink noticeable amounts of water each day. Again, early in life their intake may be limited, but the amount consumed per day increases early. Water intake is important for stimulating dry grain intake and is essential for the development of the rumen microbial population.
In summary, the newborn calf undergoes a great many changes during the first few weeks of life. The digestive tract develops from monogastric to the multi-stomach system of a ruminant animal. It goes from a digestive tract that can only digest milk and milk replacers to one that can adequately digest grains and forages. Colostrum feeding and management is an integral part of getting the calf off to a good start, and following that with a good liquid feeding system is also important. Milk replacers can be part of an economical calf raising program that leads to optimal rates of growth and proper nutrition. Finally, attention to detail and sound management practices in terms of housing and health care are all part of the system.
As your animals make the transition from calf to heifer, from non-ruminant to ruminant, remember that you as a manager play a key role in getting this done in a cost-effective and nutritionally sound manner. Properly weaning calves as early as 4 weeks will save money in feed costs, as well as improve animal health and productivity.
When making decisions on nutrition and management, remember to pay particular attention to maximizing the rumen development of young calves. Proper rumen development will allow calves to continue to grow on grain and forage-based diets, from calf to heifer to a productive member of your operation.